Somebody once said to me, the thing is, Mike doesn't understand the social contract, which is absolutely true. So it was a 95-bar string quartet for cinema. And I could see at any given moment, bar 55, that's 55 minutes into the film. Stellan Skarsgard is doing this, Salma Hayek is doing this. So I turn up with my little camera, one assistant, no crew. I thought, it's Francis Ford Coppola. It's just like, be there, be awake, make sure you've got a spare battery, and something will happen. I've tried it a bit, and yes, it's as clever as Hollywood, but that's not clever enough.
2, 1, rolling.
This is Storycode, the podcast about the business of story and storytelling. I'm James Kirkham. Let's get into it. My guest today is a musician who became a filmmaker by mistake. Newcastle R&B band in the 60s, Brian Ferry on vocals, avant-garde theatre through the 70s, all led him to this conclusion. Film is not a visual medium, it's a musical one. Something they don't teach you at film school. There's a version of Mike Figgis that Hollywood thought it had understood. That version received 2 Oscar nominations for directing Leaving Las Vegas. That version should have been the beginning of a long, well-funded career inside the system. Instead, he walked away from it, branded a troublemaker. He's one of the few people who got to see the magic of Francis Ford Coppola's process, filming a documentary on his $120 million set of Megalopolis. His takeaway? The best thing for Coppola would be to have zero budget. Today, we get into all of it. But to start, Mike, I feel very honoured to have you in front of us today. You could not be more perfect for the show Story Co. We start every episode with the same 4 simple words. Tell me a story.
It's more of a question, actually. In the works right now is a 4-part epic history of the Beatles, I guess, right? That Sam Mendes is directing. And my question is, does the world need this? Why would we need a film of people impersonating these extraordinary musicians when we have, as we see, if you go on the telly, so many documentaries and so much interesting footage of them, the real people. So why would we need to impersonate them and try and do the best job possible of impersonation? I just don't get it.
What do you think their answer is?
I don't know. I think it's called cashing in on on a cow that is the Beatles' legacy, because they're still here and people still make money from them, and somebody thought it's a good idea. I think it's a really rotten idea.
I felt like I'm a massive Beatles fan. I felt like the Get Back documentary, was it called a documentary? That huge 5-6 sprawling was sensational.
I mean, the epic thing was, putting all that footage together, and making, because they originally had made a film from that footage, but there was so much footage, and then some, like, let's look at it all again. We have all these camera angles, and let's make it long. Let's see the process, because you need the pauses and you need the bits where nothing's happening. That's what I loved about it. The whole first episodes, nothing's happening, and and George Harrison walks off, and then at a certain point something kicks in, which is like, I know we're done as a group. Let's do something good.
Do you think that when you look at that again now with eyes in 2024, the bit that you're describing there as nothing was happening, well, there was a lot of there's lots of cups of tea being drunk, there was lots of smoking going on, as we all kind of recognised that, because it felt antithetical perhaps to the time. Very antithetical to a time of mobile phones too. But was there magic in the nothing? Is that an important part of that creative process?
Well, because you're coming in on the tail end of a phenomenal success. So the nothing and the kind of frustration that comes from what we now know about their careers up to that point, and the fact that when they did a big show or something like that, they couldn't hear themselves because of the screaming, and they couldn't do anything that they really were into, which was really experimental stuff that they were doing with George Martin, which is all studio-based. So they were doing their hits, and for them, you could see, like, the remarkable intelligence of these people, that, like, the frustration of, like, okay, we've made a shitload of money, but this is so fucking boring. We want to now continue with our creativity. So this last attempt of Beatle time, the pauses and the kind of nothing happening is actually nothing could be further from the truth. So much is happening because we know so much about the context of what happened before and what will happen next. So this is priceless. There is no way a feature film full of impersonators, actors impersonating brilliant people, that's not going to convey that.
No.
So all of that magic will be distilled into a 3-act piece of whatever.
But I'm really taken, and I can't stop thinking about your point of the nothing is the wrong word. I went to art college and I was taught then in drawing and painting about negative space and how important it is. The fact that you understand what came next, what existed before, the context of that, it buzzes with a creative energy.
And because we live in a culture which is, cinema is a big deal, and it's absolutely kind of welded into our experience of how we're experiencing life. So a film that just came out last year, which is the documentary about John and Yoko in their first year in New York, and when they were being bugged by the FBI and all of that. So, if you want to study this period, then you go to that one, because after this film, this is what they did. Next. And you observe how Yoko Ono is interacting with the group and how the kind of dynamic at that time, and people were pissed off and said she broke up the group, and then so interesting. And then McCartney, is kind of somehow a brilliant writer, but now doesn't have the sandpaper that he's had from Lennon, which is still evident in the documentary.
Have you ever met Paul McCartney or any?
I did a documentary called Red, White and Blues for Martin Scorsese, which was a history of the British blues movement.
Of course, yeah.
And the centre of that was a 3-day open mic session at Abbey Road with Jeff Beck, Van Morrison, Tom Jones, Lulu, and a bunch of incredible pianists, musicians. And McCartney popped in at one point and kind of took over for a while and did a duet with Tom Jones, with Jeff Beck playing guitar, and then wouldn't give us permission to use it.
Oh, what a shame.
Yeah, it's a real shame. But I did meet him, and I also vicariously met Lennon in a macrobiotic restaurant in Notting Hill. I was playing in a hippie trio called Voice of the Rain, sitar, guitar, and flute. We were sitting on the floor playing in this macro restaurant, and Lennon and Yoko walked in. There were 2 rooms, and they went into the second room, and at that point, everybody in the first room went into the second room.
Wow.
So we were now playing by ourselves, but we were stoned and we didn't care, right? And then at one point, I looked up and I went like this, because in the doorway of this old Notting Hill house, on the floor was John Lennon's head coming round the corner, and he obviously felt bad because they'd stolen the entire audience, and he went like this.
Oh, that couldn't sound more John Lennon if it tried. What a wonderful...
So I never spoke to him, but I have this,
That's a great anecdote.
Yeah.
Well, perhaps I shouldn't be surprised that we've started telling me a story, and A, you've subverted the question, and B, you've talked about music, because I know a bit of what you've done, but I don't know it all. I know, for example, though, it started with music and with sound. Take us all the way back then. Take us back to Newcastle, would I be right, in the 60s, playing in a band with Brian Ferry, is that right? What was it like then? What was that era like, full stop?
I was just talking to my assistant, Ali, about it, because we were talking about what a fucking mess it is right now on so many levels. And he said to me, it's like, wow, it must have been amazing for you. And I said, yes, it was. I didn't realize it at the time. I thought this was normal. But looking back, I realized this was like the most privileged time, probably in the 20th century, to suddenly pop up and be a musician at that point, My dad was a passionate jazz fan, wannabe jazz pianist. And so I think what a lot of boys do, to impress my dad, I started trying to play jazz from a very early age, and he would make me he'd put on like a Louis Armstrong record or something, say, just improvise. So I got really good at improvising quite young, when I was 11.
What were you playing?
Trumpet.
Cool.
Yeah. And then I realized quite quickly that girls weren't that impressed by trumpet players, because you have this thing, like the spit comes out, it's kind of gross, and that the guitar was the thing. So I got a guitar, and I taught myself. I think it was the Burt Whedon. It was a book that came out called A Chord a Day.
Yeah.
Now you just go on YouTube and
That
Jeff
was
Beck gives you.
was the book that lasted decades. Didn't it?
Yeah. So I learned, E, A, B7, all those kind of chords, and I started playing blues and folk music and things like that. And I joined a local pop band called the Colts, who were really good at. They just did covers. They were really good. They did covers of the Beatles, quite a wide range of stuff.
Nice.
My sister and her friend was going out with, I think, with Brian Ferry.
Oh wow.
And they were students at the art college, and they'd formed this band originally called Red, White and Blues, and then called the Gas Board. They were really into kind of like blues and soul music, and like Otis Redding was a big thing, and all that. And they wanted a brass section, and she said, "Oh well, Dinah." I said, "Dinah's brother plays the trumpet, and he's in a group." So Brian Ferry and the bass player, Graham Simpson, who was also in Roxy, came to this miners' working men's club where I was doing a gig with the Colts, and then we had a drink after and said, "We're looking for a brass section. Do you want to join our band?"
And how long were you guys knocking about and playing together?
Well, I was about to go. I'd been kicked out of school. I was maybe 17 or 18, and I had this passion. I wanted to study music because I couldn't read music properly and all of that. I had a really good music teacher at school, and he recommended I apply to this college to become a music teacher in London. And I had a disastrous interview because I couldn't read piano music and all the rest of it. But I kind of obviously made some impression because they had then written to me and said, "If you're prepared to study the piano for 9 months, we'll let you in."
Wow.
Right? So then I joined the Gas Board, and we started doing gigs, and the band was really good, really tight.
Really?
Really good. We were starting to do not just, R&B, but also Dylan stuff and the Byrds and...
Lovely.
Yeah. I mean, music was just exploding at that
Yeah.
point. The band became very popular in Newcastle, really popular. We came to London to do a record contract. That went horribly wrong, went back, and it ended one night. They were trying to persuade me not to go to college. And we were in London doing a gig in Croydon somewhere. And we had a substitute drummer who was a heroin addict. And I remember dropping him off in Golders Green. And then the band just fell apart, So I went to college. Brian by then had left the Gas Board for various reasons to follow his own. But in London, we sort of kept in touch. And I went to the first rehearsal for Roxy.
Really?
Yeah, which was just Brian on a harmonium. And Graham Simpson, the bass player, and me. And we were supposed to do a gig, Chelsea Arts Club or something, and then it never happened. I thought, this band's never going to take off.
Really?
Brian on a harmonium. I just thought, it's really nice, but...
I was about to ask, were you surprised by the success? But clearly that was the case in the end.
I kind of vicariously kept in touch through Graham, and Graham joined Roxy, really hated the business, ended up throwing a brick through the management window in King's Road and vanished for 30 years to become a kind of mystic.
Oh, my God.
And then came back and an unrecognizable kind of guru-looking figure.
Wow.
Amazing guy. So I had watched their progress and glam rock and all of that. And so, I was aware of them going... But, a lot of people that I knew were doing that at the time. Individuals were exploding all over the place into like new ideas, and I'd also become interested in at that point in free jazz and experimental theatre, and that to me was more interesting. I loved playing with the Gas Board, but if you're a trumpet player, you just like get the riffs right. I didn't see that as a future for me. I mean, musically.
I mean, you've just mentioned that at the time, yes, you realise now there was a privilege being, if you like, emerging then, because it was an explosion broadly of creativity, full stop, be it artistry, musicianship, instruments, theatrical, filmic, whatever. That sounds phenomenal, by the way. How did it go from that musician piece into film? And also, how did that... Because that's a different route in from film school.
So it's all to do with like context or environment, right? So imagine this. Like, so I get to London probably in 1968, something like that. I'm at college in Barnet, so it's at the end of the Piccadilly line. But you get the Piccadilly line, you're in town, right? There was a place called the Arts Laboratory in Covent Garden, run by a guy called Jim Haynes. And this was the most amazing venue I've ever been in my life. So it had a macrobiotic restaurant, it had a theatre space, performance space, it had a cinema.
Wow.
But the kind of social area, so you'd go there and it would be Mick Jagger, but it would also be like Timothy Leary, it would be some French actress, whatever. Yeah, so that kind of cross range of all this shit was happening in the arts lab. So there was experimental theatre, there was experimental music, and then you got to see a Godard movie or a Peter Watkins movie or something like that, all in the same hub. It was very brief, maybe a year and a half, 2 years.
Really, right.
But in that time, so many connections, and you suddenly realize, well, actually, this is all related, and this is a big point for me. There is no division between experimental music, experimental theatre, cinema, macrobiotic food. This is a cultural phenomenon, and you can move around. You don't have to kind of slam the door and go, I live in this space, you know. So that crossover made it totally acceptable to join a free jazz ensemble, or free music, they called it. So free music basically was a bunch of people would get together. There's no key, there is no pulse. You just basically start playing, and then something happens, and somebody might lead for a while, and you listen. So the most important thing, I was playing one night, so enthusiastic, I was like 20 years old or something, and this rather famous Canadian clarinetist called Albert came over and whispered in my ear and he said, just listen, man, just listen. Like, shut the fuck up, you know, and listen. And I was like, okay, that's very good advice. So listening, you know, is a key thing. So then I joined them. They worked with an experimental theatre company called The People Show. I liked what they were doing. At one point, there's a huge fight. The musicians fell out with the actors because the actors got pissed off because the musicians would never shut the fuck up.
This is great.
Yeah, and I kind of agreed with the theatre people.
You
It's
sided with them.
Yeah, just listen for a while. You don't have to play all the time. So there was a split, and I then joined the performance group, and I stayed with them for the next 10 years.
And is that where you learn the grammar, if you like, of performance, of audience and...
Audience. It's like learning to interact with a tough audience who in Germany might throw things at you or try and beat you up during the performance.
Really? Actually?
Yeah, for sure. Or stub a cigarette out on your friend who's naked, you know.
Really?
Yeah. Because you provoked them in the first place, you know, so you've got to be prepared to get it back. So there was no, like, safety net at all. So you learn about interaction. I mean, I was in Hamburg at this festival. There was a late-night performance of a very famous black blues musician who was already in his 80s. He'd been brought over by some promoter, and he was very kind of like, you know, really like old school blues singer. And we were talking to him in the bar before his show, and he's saying, how is it? And he said, it's really tough, man. I'm just out there by my own. I just need other musicians. So Jose, who was in the group, a crazy Mexican performer, sort of said, hey, Mike, he plays the trumpet. Mike, you should play with him. He says, you play trumpet, man? I went, yeah. He said, hey, come jam with me. So I go on stage with this guy, and there's a diehard, young, passionate blues audience who have very strict ideas about what the blues is. This guy is playing in some very strange keys. We're not necessarily in tune. And I'm on a very beaten up old trumpet. Yeah. And I kind of go, and I'm just trying to listen to him and find out what key is it. And, you know, and I suddenly hear this kind of woof, 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 and suddenly all their boots are going at the same time. And they're going, get off the fucking stage.
Wow.
And I'm booed off the stage with this. I said, I'm so sorry. So it's like a period when all this confrontation is really healthy, terrifying sometimes. You know?
I find these obviously so formative foundations for what was to come next, as it
Yeah,
were.
yeah.
I'm going to get it wrong, but didn't Nicolas Cage, didn't he quote, say, you described the Leaving Las Vegas score as that mixture of blues at the start and jazz in the middle and operatic at the end? So my assumption would be, wow, of course, with those origins, and he's playing in a band with Brian Ferry, and sound design and soundcraft is,
Yeah,
of
yeah.
course, everything. But that bit in the middle that you've just described,
yeah.
that must have created a robustness, a resilience, and an understanding of audience that so few people who end up making movies have. Would that be fair to say?
Failure is second nature, and I'm just putting a film together now, and I have quotes from Lynch and Abramovich and John Burge and all these people, all talking about the fact that failure is an essential part of your progress, and also destroying your work is an essential part of your process. So then, is there anything underneath that pretty surface, right? And if there isn't, then start again. So part of the resilience is like you get very used to like, no, I don't like you, you know, because it's also balanced with I do like you sometimes, you know. So I made a film called Liebestraum. I love the film, but it's a very experimental film made in the Hollywood system, which was never going to work, right? So there's a test screening in New York. Kim Novak's in the film. And it's her return to the big screen, and so all her fans are there. They're all middle-aged ladies from New York. And they hate the film so much that when they come to do the test results, people are tearing up the test. They're stabbing, there's paper, they're writing filthy words on it, you know. The guy who's running the test says to me, I don't know if you're interested, but this is the worst result of any test I've ever been in charge of. And I'm, oh, great. And I was sitting there, Richard Gere was there and Cindy Crawford was there and all these other actors. And they were kind of going, Mike, don't worry, you know. And I was sitting there, I was thinking, this is so weird. I'm so happy.
Wow.
This is so familiar to me, this feeling. And it's not painful in the slightest. It just tells me something about the film and about the time and the climate. I mean, America was about to go to war the next day in the first Iraqi war.
Oh, yeah, 91.
So the atmosphere in America was horrible and it was really weird. But I was completely fine.
It's interesting, isn't it? That you'd found a state that you were so familiar with, born from those foundations of experimental theatre with Germans telling you to get off the stage. So I suspect most people watching will know you from Leaving Las Vegas, and I've just mentioned the Cage quote there. I mean, Cage walked out with, you walked out with 2 Oscar nominations, and he won. Within that, I know there's a quite famous story. I think it was on the Las Vegas Strip. You were shooting without permits and permission. Is there a nod to that past coming through there again? Was it your own resilient understanding of, don't worry, I've got this?
It's about control. So going back to, you know, you said, were you prepared for this? What had happened was I made a film called Stormy Monday. End of the experimental theatre. I suddenly became interested in film. Oh, this is really cool. So I formed my own theatre company, and then I did 3 really complicated productions where I incorporated film with live action. So the same actors would be on stage and on screen, and they would interact with themselves in a kind of...
Amazing.
Yeah, really.
When was this?
80s, early 80s, you know. Kind of extraordinary.
Yeah.
People say afterwards, I love that bit where you did. I said, no, that wasn't. That was on film.
That's
Because,
incredible.
and they got confused. You have some live music, you have some pre-recorded music, so you start to blend all this. And so that got me into like, film's kind of interesting, particularly film sound. Soundtracks are really interesting. Applied to the film school, didn't get in. And then I hustled a lot. I was teaching a bit. And I finally got the money together for my first feature film, Stormy Monday. It was Tommy Lee Jones, Sting, Melanie Griffiths, great actors.
Amazing.
Set in Newcastle, kind of a gangster film. Bit of a cult hit in America, disaster in the UK. A pattern that I was very familiar with. And then I get an agent, and then I get internal affairs. And I jump into internal affairs completely confident, naive, and I just shoot it the way I want to shoot it, because I've seen so many good American gangster movies. And it's a hit, you know. So suddenly I'm like, wow, this is a piece of cake. I was like, all these stories about Hollywood, they're really nice people. They really like me.
This is excellent.
Yeah. And suddenly I'm being offered money that is unheard of in my life. It wasn't that much, but compared to what I'd had before, it was like, have they accidentally added a note or something? I'm kind of set for a while, so then I do Liebestraum, which is goes straight down the toilet. Then I do Mr. Jones, which is a nightmare for 2 years because of a big fight with Hollywood. So I have a series of big fights with the likes of Ridley Scott and all kinds of people.
And is Hollywood a small town? There's a reputation developed.
Village.
Right.
Somebody once said to me, the thing is, Mike doesn't understand the social contract. It was absolutely true. I did kind of know it, but I didn't want to do it, right?
Yeah, there's a
I was
difference.
cocky,
Yeah.
arrogant, naive. But at the same time, I fiercely knew that that was not the good way to go creatively. So by the time we get jumping ahead to leaving Las Vegas, I'm so pissed off with that system. I find this really dark novel. I adapt it. And I kind of go, the only way to do this is to go back to my way, which is to shoot it on Super 16, reduce the crew to an absolute minimum, reduce the trucks to a minimum, shoot it in 3 weeks. So there's a very tight schedule.
3 weeks?
Yeah. The thing you can't calculate is getting the cast right. This was a miracle.
Right.
So Elizabeth Shue and Nicolas Cage, no casting, phone calls, really just personal contact. And then a bunch of lovely friends who said, I'll just come and, Danny Houston, I'll come and work for a day.
Awesome.
Julian Lennon, I'll come and work for a day.
Awesome.
Mariska Hegarty, and so on. So there's all these cameos, including Lou Rawls, the amazing blues singer.
But you can't predict, presumably, because of because you don't know the interrelationships going
know how
on
it's
there,
gonna
the
work.
chemistry on set. And
The whole thing about film is you go on a bunch of hunches, right?
Yeah.
You have to trust your intuition, but there is no law that says it's right.
That's almost comically paradoxical to the entire nature of the creation of film normally, because everything's planned to the nth degree. As you say, the million people involved. But
So by reducing numbers,
That's
I realized
interesting.
that, the problem goes through inflation of possibilities, right? So if you deflate the possibles and reduce it to the absolute essential minimum that you think you need to do that thing, your chances of success incrementally go way up.
So you were doing it as a means of playing the percentages to reduce the
Yes.
chances of it, if you like, going wrong.
Control.
An increase in the control.
And also, two things. One is I realized on the film before that unless I had a camera in front of me, I didn't have any contact with the actors. And so, beautiful cinematographer Declan Quinn agreed to letting me shoot camera as well as him.
Awesome.
So we shot 2 cameras, 16 millimeter. I owned a 16mm camera, so that was okay.
But again, that's a control, a creative control that is
I
something.
mean, night and day, man. You sort of like the minute you do this and you're looking at an actor, and because I'm the director, I can actually say, do it again.
Yeah.
Okay, do it slower this time. Don't move your hand so fast, and we're still running.
Yeah.
So we haven't broken that cut. And then you walk over to the DP and go, let's talk. And
That's
all
so
of that.
interesting.
So you cut through all of that waiting time and that interruption. So action cut is an interruption each time you're making a
Absolutely.
film. On stage, the best performances come around about 10 minutes. It starts to kick in 10 minutes in.
I can believe that.
As they get, like a musician.
I can believe that.
They get the flow.
Yeah.
And Laurie Metcalf, who is, in my opinion, the greatest living American actress, who's in a bunch of those films and is a friend, I saw her do Long Day's Journey into Night. I went twice, and the performance was different each time. And she plays a woman who's, I think, addicted to morphine. And I said, wow, how do you do this? She said, I don't know. I just channel something, and each night it's different.
Oh,
Once
wow.
I'm in the zone. When you find an actor like that, you are,
Of course.
it's payday.
I love the fact that you're saying every time you're cutting, you are quite literally stopping a creative process and
Yeah.
restarting it every time. In a modern series that did so well, like Adolescence, which is, famously shot in one take, and I know there's many examples of that now. Are they examples of that where the very visceral, the unbelievable feeling that actually often that can exude from a...
Yeah, I think if luck is on your side and you haven't let what I call boy porn camera tech take first position on the grid, because a lot of that is like, oh, you see that camera move. No one's ever recovered from the Steadicam shot in Goodfellas, right?
It's still talked about on social media.
Yeah,
It's
no,
still a
good.
clip.
Yeah, and it's a good shot.
Of course. But
It's okay. But
but
then
it's
so is a Bergman film where it's just a locked off camera for 10 minutes on someone's face. It's like, ultimately you're photographing at the face of an actor and you're blowing it up so big that the audience will see every nuance
Sure.
of an eye twitch. Are they telling a lie? Is this the truth? Is it not? And that's what cinema gives you that theatre doesn't,
Yeah.
right? It gives you macro.
Yeah.
So if the camera porn is all about, wow, and they must have been on a crane first and then they jumped off and oh, wow, that's the problem.
So you're starting to lose the reason for doing it in the first place, and you're only looking at the surface level.
And you ask the
aspect.
question, why? Why are you doing that? Like
Yeah.
Hitcher will say, why are you moving the camera? That's a beautiful single take and you've gone up the stairs and you jumped out the window, but why? What are you delivering there?
So I was going to ask, I'd love you to talk a little bit about the Figgis box, this technique, this apparatus, if you like. Because in my old world of advertising, I've always used to say creativity comes really from two things, adversity and constraint. And the fact that in this time of, well, if you've called it tech kind of porn where tools and tech at your fingertips and anything is feasible or possible, it's almost like you're deliberately distilling it down even further. Is that a creative rationale to do that, or are we back in the realms as you were describing them of you wanted to eliminate any of the possibilities of it going wrong, or
It depends what your ambition is.
Right.
For a lot of young filmmakers, the ambition is to be famous, get paid a lot of money, have a kind of bit of a red carpet life from time to time and so on. It comes with a lot of pop star kind of, potential. Now with 4K, 6K, 8K, it's just like we're at the point when do we really want to see every blackhead mark and
Not for
every
me.
concealing piece of makeup and so on? So there's the question about the film industry as an industry that needs to propagate itself and keep fat because it's employing a lot of people. Central to all that is the idea that equipment needs to be big and heavy and need a lot of people to maintain. So the counter to that is a camera like this that really just needs one person, right? And maybe someone on a mic. That's how I'm shooting now.
Really?
Down to just me.
And is it freeing? Is it liberating?
Totally liberating. You've got to know what you're doing.
Of
and you've got to
course.
also, it's so easy to make a mistake and forget to hit the right button and then you've got this great take and there's no sound or something like that. But that's one thing. And I think that at a certain point, roundabout when I did Timecode or those digital experimental films, there was this moment of we could go this way or we could go that way. It's like could be totally liberating for a whole new generation of wannabe filmmakers. On the other hand, you could see that the industry was shitting themselves with fear at the idea of it's the equivalent of AI.
Yeah, just explain to those that you did Timecode. Is it in four
screens, a real-time film on four
screens at once, and wrote it on the whole thing on
music paper. Yeah.
Music paper.
Yeah.
For similar reasons?
No, I mean, necessity is the mother of invention. So I had the idea to shoot a real-time film on 4 screens as an experiment, and I was going to do it in London for like 5,000 quid, shoot it on Saturday morning, show it on Saturday night in a gallery,
Wow.
right? Like, how clever am I? I had a contract at Sony in LA. I was friends with John Calley, who ran the studio. Told him about it over lunch, and he said, well, why don't you do it here? I mean, the studio is called Sony. We make that stuff. He saw that as a kind of flagship entree into the new digital world. He was absolutely right. And it made the front page of the New York Times and all this Time magazine, everything, right? As the new thing. And so I ended up shooting it for whatever, I don't know, maybe $6, $7, $8 million or something, with 35 actors, on 4 screens simultaneously. I shot it 15 times, and I had to choose the one that worked the best. There was no intercutting because there was no edit, right?
How was that process for you?
Fantastic, a joy. And I shot one of the cameras, which was at that time, was a physical feat. 19 minutes, handheld, a big camera.
Gosh.
Yeah, running around different rooms, doing your own exposure, doing your own focus, all of this.
I mean, there's a big school of thought at the moment, post-social media. We're in this kind of emerging post-feed space, funnily enough, very much AI, of course, but there is this yearning for physical again.
I mean, I'll tell you an interesting thing. On Timecode, I didn't answer your questions.
No.
How do you write?
Oh, yeah.
How do you write a script?
I'd forgotten the question.
For 4 films at the same time,
Yeah.
where the narrative has to cross over and they need to relate to each other, right? You try folding a big piece of paper into 4 because you have to have some time connection, right? Like a script tells you
This would fry my brain.
page by page, cut to. But if you're not cutting and the simultaneous action, how do you show where everybody is at the same time? And I agonized over it for a while. I went, oh, fuck's sake, I studied music. The string quartet. It's a string quartet.
Oh, wow.
The first line of music was camera A, camera B, camera C, and each bar line represented 1 minute of screen time. So it was a 95-bar string quartet for cinema. And I could see at any given moment, bar 55, that's 55 minutes into the film. Stellan Skarsgard is doing this, Salma Hayek is doing this, Kyle MacLachlan is there. They're all talking at the same time. Kyle, you go 1 minute later. Stellan, stay where you are. Salma, wait 3 minutes before you do that funny thing.
So you're a conductor-in-chief of an orchestra,
Yeah.
albeit of cast and characters.
And I gave all the actors the music paper. They went, what the fuck?
Yeah, what was it?
I said, I'm going to give you a quick music lesson. Look, this is how it works. Here's a pencil. Here's what you guys call an eraser. We call a rubber.
You taught them music and
then it was wonderful. After each screening, we'd watch it. They'll all have their thing. And I go, okay, stop there. It's minute 55. Everyone look. I go, Stellan, go 1 minute later. And he'd go, yeah. And he'd rub it out. 1 minute later,
I love that.
They'd make their own corrections like a musician would at a rehearsal, right? The other thing was the rules were very simple. Actors, wear your own clothes. You can wear whatever you like, and you can change day by day because I'm never going to intercut. Drive yourself to work. Drive yourself home. Get your own lunch because we'd shoot in the morning and then screen in the afternoon. Do your own makeup.
Is it just creating a grounded, down-to-earth, we're all in this attitude?
Yeah. We're all in this, and there's famous actors and completely unknown actors all working together. There were 1 or 2 exceptions of diva moments, but for the most part, like Salma Hayek was in there doing other people's makeup in the toilet.
That's fantastic.
It was the most wonderful, joyous, collaborative experience I've ever had.
There's so much in the making of that. You said right at the start, you see it all as one. It all sits under an umbrella and call it art or whatever you want to call it, but ultimately, this delineation is a nonsense.
I'll give you a really good example.
Yeah, go on.
I do this thing called live mix of timecode, where I take the basic timecode and I strip all the audio out except for the dialogue, and I change the music and I VJ it. I did it at the National Film Theatre like 3 weeks ago. Where
Did you?
Yeah, the film starts, and then I have a choice of which audio I'm going to play them.
So it's entirely new every time.
Yeah, and one of the things that came up when we were talking about it in the Q&A was this. So you shot the film the first time based on a series of conversations. You can't rehearse it, right? And everyone's got their timing, everyone's got their watch synchronized, and they know they have to be at this place at a certain time. And in the film, there are 4 earthquakes, right? As a kind of way of breaking the film up into sections, right? So the earthquakes, obviously, we have no special effects. So the earthquakes have to be achieved by camera shaking at exactly the right time and actors acting like they're in an earthquake, which they all thought was really a silly thing to do, So I said, okay, we'll just go for it. We shoot the film on the first day at 11 o'clock. We've wrapped by 12:30. They're going to have their lunch. I then put the film together onto 4 screens with the technicians. They come back at 2 o'clock, and now we screen the film. I've got a mixer, and I've got a bunch of CDs. And so while they're watching it, I start putting in some Miles Davis or some Mahler or some Morricone or something, or my own score, right? And they, for the first time in the history of cinema, actors have made a film in the morning, and they're watching the film a couple of hours later with music.
And it's original every time.
So they suddenly went, oh, Mike thinks this is like a Mahler kind of moment, very romantic, Death in Venice kind of, love story moment. And so those actors, when we shoot the next time, they're imagining Mahler while they're acting, and they are now influenced by the music. And day by day, as you shoot the film 15 times, they become influenced by what they saw the day before, a privilege that actors have never been given ever in their life. So you kind of realize, okay, film, they always talk about we're all making the same film. By the way, the most bullshit statement of all time, we're not all making the same film. I mean, hopefully I've got a strong enough vision, and hopefully you understand what I'm trying to do and you will help me. But we're not making the same film.
It's almost impossible because
Yeah.
everyone's perception is different.
We were talking about John Hegarty earlier,
Yeah,
right?
we
You know,
were.
and he's such a wise guy.
For those who don't know, a very famous man in British advertising, created one of the biggest and best UK advertising agencies,
BBH, yeah.
and a friend of yours, someone you know.
And he was a bit of a mentor to me. And so I bumped into him the other day, and one of the things he brought up was, he says, you know, the biggest misunderstanding statement of all time is that we learn from our mistakes. And he did a whole kind of rant about he didn't believe this. And I went away going, John, that's bullshit. We do learn from our own mistakes. My entire life is based on mistakes.
There are so many parts of this. I mean, the mistakes piece, my old art teacher, bless him, he was wonderful, but he always said art is all about mistakes. And it was a really lovely kind of approach. At art college then, it was very much reminiscent of what you described earlier. We would have to rip up our paintings at the end. So it obviously taught you.
Marina Abramovich, a great quote from her in an interview that I did with her was that Marina Abramovich is this very famous performance artist, you know, unique, you know, powerful woman, and who famously, with her ex-husband, you know, they used to literally face each other either with a gun or a knife or something like that, and they would risk their lives in these tied together in these performances. And she said this wonderful thing. She said when she was studying art, her teacher said, when you get really good with your right hand, switch to your left. Kind of make life difficult for yourself at every possible opportunity.
Is that what you've been doing?
The strong, passionate idea of the privilege of trying something new means you're going into if it's genuinely new, you're going into a kind of territory that you don't understand. So be prepared to fuck up.
And with that in mind, when you're running the live version timecode example that you've just been describing that was only a few weeks back, what is that and what are you in that process? Is that a performance?
It's a performance. I was nervous about it because I haven't done it for quite a few years.
Right.
But a young filmmaker called Mark Jenkins, so he's very innovative kind of, you know, indie filmmaker. And he loved timecode. He'd seen it when he was a student. So he invited me to do it, right? And so I was nervous about it. I practiced a little bit at the weekend, but then when I came to do it, the audience were all around me. I'm sitting in the audience, facing the screen. So there's public behind, in front, by me side. And the film starts, and then it's like music. As soon as you could do the first opening thing, you know, there's my favorite quotation is from Carl Jung. He says, "Don't worry about suspension of disbelief. If it's a good story, you will enter the story and you will become part of the story." And he calls this participation mystique. And that's just the best phrase ever, right? And that's what happens.
How are you feeling at the moment? We've talked about tech in terms of hardware and from the biggest cameras that you're lugging around to how you're minimalising equipment on set. When I went to see, I don't know, One Battle After Another, big blockbuster movie, I'm like, I don't know how you will ever get to something like that because it's so referential on different eras where music is used and scored in a certain way and the multi-layered rich
I hated
nods. I was about to ask.
Yeah.
I thought
I hated
you
it
might.
because I mean it's very good, and he's a really good filmmaker.
You think you rate him as a director and as a...
He's a good director. I don't think he's a great director. I don't think Quentin Tarantino's a great director. I think a lot of these guys are like somehow have arrived at some kind of salon status, and they've capitalized on it.
Yeah, the reason I remember I must have been 17 when I saw Pulp Fiction. I think the reason I loved it so much, or have referred to it since, was it was a movie that I could go back to at any point. But it reminded me of a time, not the time it was set, but the time of me being young.
Yeah.
I think.
It's fine. That places us in a nice way, you know.
But very much anchored with sound, as in with music,
Sure.
with songs.
Yeah.
I don't know how you ever get close to that with the power that's supposedly beginning to be at our fingertips with artificial intelligence. What's your take? Are you resenting?
I think AI is kind of rubbish. I really do. It's much more pernicious and pervasive, but it's like 3D or smell around or something like that. I think it'll find its place in years to come as being, oh yeah, do you remember when we were all so frightened? Remember in 2000 we thought the clocks were going to stop and we were all going to die.
I remember that.
But in terms of the creative thing, I've tried it a bit, and yet it's as clever as Hollywood, but that's not clever enough.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah. I mean, I tried it once, and it was as intelligent a conversation about the potential for a TV script as I've ever had with anybody in Hollywood.
That's interesting.
It was smarter.
So could you use it to riff?
Oh yeah, for sure.
In that way.
If you want a product, yes, it will give you that product. You know, given right now, the moment when you say now you run with it, it's so deeply stupid that it's almost comedic, right?
But there's something encouraging by you saying that. And so, what would be you advising the young you?
There's a really
right
good
now?
post finally on that I'm seeing on Instagram, which is basically, you know, waving the flag I've been kind of trying to wave for 20 years, which is technology is your friend. Democratization of cinema is totally possible. It's all on the table for you. Get your good-looking mates to be in the film to start off with. Film acting is not as complicated as theater acting. You know, you can do great things with your mates. You know, and some of the films that we've loved over the last years, these indie films, have been people making films with their mates, right? What no one has been focusing on is distribution, which is like, you know, we're in a kind of glut, a saturation of visual media. There's way too much stuff. So getting through all that shit and finding your audience and then finding a venue is really the big challenge now. So get on with it. So what are you waiting for? Are you waiting for like the lifeboat from Hollywood or, you know, from Netflix? That's your only hope? Wake up and smell the coffee, man, and just like find somebody smart that actually likes doing this shit, who knows how to use social media to get your little promos out. So by the time the movie comes out, people know about it. And then don't go to the Odeon. Just find a really cool building that has a blackout. Get a projector and two speakers.
I was about to say precisely that, a handheld projector. I'm certain that's almost the only way to cut through now. Now, the content that comes out of that might be amplified through social. Lovely, that might go viral because it looks so interesting. But it needs a physicality and a moment, doesn't it, to happen? And that can be done in a more DIY, lo-fi way.
I mean, the truth is horrible, you know. So Paul Auster, who passed away sadly last year, you know, great American writer, and we had been friends for a long time, and we always talked about doing a project together, and never finally did it. One of the conversations I had was about teaching. He said, you know, he didn't like to teach anymore. He says it was too disheartening. When he was teaching literature, he said, because you have this, you know, totally rapt, you know, audience of young people who are just, you know, looking at you, just absorbing like blotting paper, your wisdom, hopefully. And then you meet them 10 years later, and there's, of that class, maybe 5 are now still working. You meet them 10 years later, maybe 1. So the attrition rate, if we want to be brutal, if you want to be a filmmaker or a writer or whatever, the attrition rate is horrific. So if you've got anything to say, you know, I believe if you really have a voice, you'll get through. If you connect with the right kind of energy, that will help you, because it's not necessarily true that if you're a really great visionary filmmaker that you're going to be any good at self-publicity.
No, I agree.
There's a great quote in The Guardian, I think today or yesterday, just saying, it's a guy who's just written a novel, and he said, there will be no mistaken adulation for a young, fresh-faced, good-looking first-time writer, because I'm 55 or something, right? So either judge me by my work or nothing else, but you were up against sort of narcissism gone mad, you know, in terms of like, you know, what is your marketing potential, you know? Are you good-looking? Are you young, you know?
Very true. Before we finished, what's next from you?
Well, I'm really looking forward to making some money.
Come on, you've made enough. You're all right. You don't need that.
I live in London, man. It's really expensive. I did the Coppola documentary. I took a year and a half out, made literally zero from that. So what I've been doing for the past year and a half is shooting the ultimate sort of, let's say, consequence of what we've been discussing now, which is to be shooting film in Korea and in Japan with just 2 actors in Korean and Japanese, starting with nothing. I went 5 times so far, and each time I've edited, gone back, I've AI translated, we've developed, and so on. So it's a kind of organically developing story, really about two things. One is like sensuality and its connection to death.
Wow.
Which has always obsessed me. And secondly, what is the creative process and why do we do that? You know, what is that weird urge that makes you get out of bed in the morning? You know, so I'm trying to kind of, in a way, I'm asking that question of myself.
To yourself. I love that.
It's a kind of self-examination.
What took you to that part of the world?
I used to teach in a philosophy college briefly every summer in Switzerland, and they're all post-grad, and some of my students had worked in Korea, and we were talking, and they said, you should go to Korea. It's really an exploding culture. I think you'd really like it. So I was my interest was piqued. I started to watch K-dramas, pretty interesting. And I bought a ticket to Korea, and I just met a few people, started networking, and I went, this is an interesting place. Something's happening here. And I want to find out more about it. Yeah.
Fabulous, again, creative privileges. You were describing it earlier, that therefore you can go, okay, great, my next project, I'm leaning right into it and being amongst it in the way that you are. You mentioned, you were saying it in a self-deprecating or funny way about Francis Ford Coppola, and you said you didn't make a load out of it. But tell us briefly, please, about Megadoc for those who were interested.
So Francis Ford Coppola was something I met through his nephew, Nicolas Cage, actually at the Oscar party after.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And he was obviously incredibly sort of fascinating character, Francis, very garrulous and, you know, like friendly and everything. And we sort of kept in touch, sort of became distant friends. And, you know, every so often I was a guest editor on his magazine and things like that. And I had dinner with him one time. And then I heard through somebody else that he was doing this film Megalopolis, which I had no idea what it was, to be honest. But I wrote to him and said, Francis, congratulations, that sounds great. And I said, you know, if you need a fly on the wall, let me know. Long story short, he said, yeah, come and film it. So I turn up with my little camera, one assistant, no crew, and just jump in, no plan, you know, because I didn't want to plan. I thought, it's Francis Ford Coppola. It's just like, be there, be awake, make sure you've got a spare battery, and, you know, something will happen, which it did. So it's $120 million of his own money financing it, shooting 3 cameras, massive crew, all the bells and whistles of a Hollywood movie, despite the fact that he's rejecting Hollywood by doing it himself, right? And as the producers said, I asked what's different about this movie and any other movie? He said, there is nobody on the set that can say no to Francis. He's the boss. Wow. That was the atmosphere. So, and then it went kind of pear-shaped for him because he wanted to do like a bit of Marvel Universe kind of digi stuff. And then he hated all of that. So he fell out with the art department and he fired all of them. And, you know, Francis Ford Coppola, if you know anything about him, his entire history has been, he's bipolar, has been conflicts. At one point I say in the documentary to him, you seem to thrive on chaos. He says, no, I make order out of chaos. But he didn't cop to the fact that you create the chaos in order to...
That's interesting.
Well, you do that. You destroyed your own work and then you're fixing it, you know, which is actually what Lynch and everybody says, you know, so...
And you came out saying it would have been beneficial to have done it on zero budget, not the 100 and whatever million.
I mean, my thought was this. When I did Leaving Las Vegas, there was a big buzz about 16 mil. And I remember I had a fascinating conversation with Stanley Kubrick, who'd seen the film and just loved it and just wanted to know about 16 mil. And then just laughed and said, that's, you know, your budget is coffee money for me. And I could never go back to that. But I'm intrigued, well done. Bertolucci was making a film about student revolution. I said, you should shoot on 16. And all these filmmakers who were intrigued by the look of Leaving Las Vegas, but could not bear the idea of downscaling. Because it's what we talked about before, which is like, you know, the most feared list in Hollywood is who's the most successful. It's nothing to do with your movie. It's like, who's number one as a power broker, and what was your status last year? So I think Francis... I just thought you'd be so much happier with my little camera, maybe, but maybe not. But in terms of what you say you're trying to do, you know, this is an anachronistic, outdated system that is not fit for purpose anymore for you. But you are addicted to this structure. You and Lucas actually invented most of this shit.
Wow.
And now it's smothering you.
There's a lesson there,
Isn't there?
Full stop right now
Yeah.
in the world that we're in. My goodness, there's a
Yeah.
lesson there. I mean, Mike, thank you so much for your time.
It's been a pleasure, man.
the mix of ideas, the origins, the music, the score, the feeling of creativity from constraint. You epitomise why we do this show, and we're very thankful to have you on. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
If you enjoyed this week's show, please follow us on Instagram at StoryCodePod and subscribe on Spotify, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. It really does help. StoryCode is a Telltale Industries production. It's recorded in Studio One at the brilliant TYX Studios here in King's Cross. Produced by Jago Lee, assistant produced by Nellie Batt, and it's edited by Emma Gifford. Special thanks to Craig Hepsinstall, Jack Freegard, Tyler Newton, and Issa Gibson. I'm James Kirkham. This has been a masterclass in how storytelling pays in this modern media landscape. Go out, tell a story that matters, and we'll see you next week.